Welcome to the Build Business Acumen podcast, where we deliver practical knowledge and powerful guidance. Here is your futuristic host, Nathaniel Schooler.
I'd like to introduce you to Mike Briercliffe. Mike is a digital leader, a social business practitioner who specialises in the information technology and snow sports sectors, occasionally both together. With over 50 years in management and marketing specifically, Mike has helped grow over 50 businesses, some from the ground up, and he has helped many people to progress in their careers. So let's get into this interesting talk. Well, hey Mike, it's really great to speak to you again.
Yeah, good. Thanks for calling me, Nat.
No worries. I'm pleased that I'm going to learn a bit more about innovation. I mean, I think it's a massive subject, isn't it, really? And as you said to me when we were discussing this expert talk, I said to you, it can be anywhere in business and in life, and process, product and departmental innovation, right? But you pointed out a few other really interesting elements to it.
I was talking about innovation being all around us and able to be interpreted as product innovation or service innovation or process innovation or business development, it's such a wide subject. So we need to focus in on the areas that we want to really talk about. I mean, to me, I've regarded myself as being innovative throughout my career, and which is quite a long one, as you know. And to me, the innovation matter in business is often best treated as experimentation and as an activity carried out by a small number of people, not the whole business. So for instance, if I wanted to innovate a new customer approach for dealing with my clients, what I'd do is I'm going to find the 2 or 3 best people that I had who I knew had the capability of delivering that innovation, get them to do it in a silo to start with, and have them come up with some results and some measurable milestones and some understandable concepts for taking the business forward, and then taking the business forward in that silo before then redelivering it to the rest of the business. My experience was, if you tried to get 20 people to deliver innovation, it would never work. Focusing in with the best 2 or 3 people and figuring out what the right pattern is, what the right speed is, what the right features are, and then working on that with a small number has 2 effects. One is you actually prove it without it becoming too dispersed, and you actually show the people who aren't in it where you're going, and they suddenly, normally anyway, they rally to the cause, rather than saying, well, we're all going to do this and hope that we can all set off on this path. And in my experience, that tends to disperse the focus, and you never get the innovation that you're looking for. So focusing in with a team and then delivering that experience to the wider team seems to me the best way to do things, particularly when you're focusing in on better ways to do your business.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, actually. And I think it's a difficult one, isn't it? I mean, I pride myself on being innovative as well, and try and come up with better ways to sort of do things all the time. And from what I sort of said to you a bit earlier, I was saying that when I was working in production in the wine industry, like however many years, 20 years ago ish, I sort of turned around and I said, well, why am I folding a box and then putting an innard into the box and then folding and then turning the box over and then sticking the tape, right? When surely I can just get a box with an innard in already and then stick the bottom of the box and turn it up the right way. But that innovation would only work if, for one, the actual new product was cheaper, or you reapportion the labor cost to somewhere else within the business, right? But is it not true that everybody, especially with AI coming along, with artificial intelligence and the way that machines are learning, that everybody needs to be thinking innovation in their job and how to make their job easier and better and smoother, right?
Process improvement is what you're really talking about there, which comes under the general heading of innovation, I guess. And the answer to that is yes. Although, going back to my earlier point, that's really why you need to choose your best people and get them to innovate and then re-deliver that innovation to the rest of the business, because not everybody in the business either wants to innovate or is capable of innovating. A lot of people are good at following what's already been proven. A lot of people don't want change.
Yeah.
So yeah, what you said, it's everybody's responsibility to innovate, but you've got to have a certain mindset to be innovative, and not everybody is.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think you could also break a particular part of the business if you don't do it correctly. Because I was reading something the other day, I think it was from Harvard or somewhere like that, and it was just saying that, certain departments are there to be solid, to be rock solid, and the last thing that department wants to actually do is to innovate, because it's going to break a process that's working extremely well, right?
Yep. And that goes straight to my earlier point, really. You don't want to disrupt the whole organization in terms of innovation. You've got something that's working, then keep it working and have a small team innovate, and then re-deliver a successful innovation back to the rest of the business.
Yeah. Yeah. So with the move in technology now, I mean, I've been sort of, I do a lot of audio interviews. I use the audio files and I transcribe those into words, right? So that's just one example of an innovation, which it is moving in the right direction. It isn't quite there yet, but it's sort of an augmented approach between like a human actually sitting there and listening to that audio, uh, and actually a computer that is turning that audio into some words that then can be indexed, for example, in a search engine, right? And as we're sort of moving forwards with these new innovations in technology, jobs are changing, and people are actually becoming more able to sort of work alongside the computer instead of just sort of doing their human job, if you like, and then perhaps doing something with a computer, right?
Well, there aren't many jobs that I can think of that over the last, let's say, 20 years that haven't involved a computer. I think it's important to recognise that artificial intelligence didn't suddenly arrive in a rocket ship from space. It's a development of computing, and what we today call artificial intelligence, and wrap mystique and black magic around that's not the way it is. When artificial intelligence was conceived as a possibility, can a computer think like a human? That's where it first came from, with Alan Turing and so on, and that was in the 1950s. The approach is not the idea of the approach is not new, but it's taken a long time in computing terms, particularly, to get to a point now where we can all look at something like this and give it a name: artificial intelligence. It's important to recognize, and I was discussing this the other day with some people we know quite well, you and I know quite well. The Turing test, to my knowledge, has not yet been passed. The Turing test was, here is a way of deciding whether a computer is thinking like a human. And that test has not been passed, to my knowledge. There's been talk of it being passed, but I think it's been poo-hooed. Artificial intelligence is now becoming an accepted term, but the very gateway through which it has to pass to become artificial intelligence as defined by Turing has not yet been. They haven't passed through that gate. So there's a bandwagon talking about new and innovative ways of doing stuff, but we're still really only at the very beginning of it, and it's got a fuzzy definition around it now, because it's not clearly defined. Is this computer of its own volition thinking like a human? All of what we're seeing is advanced coding.
Yes,
and it's very useful, and it's very innovative, but it isn't yet in the spirit of what was defined as being artificial intelligence.
Yeah, 100%. I actually looked into the group that we're sort of talking around right now, and I had a look at some of the information in there and just thought, well, to be honest, like it's not adding any value to my life even reading it. Like, I mean, I'm not being arrogant about it, but you've been studying this a lot longer than I have, and I don't expect you to say the same thing, but I think it's very useful to actually see the opinions of so-called thought leaders within the space, and actually they're not really up to speed with what's actually happening. And the reality of it is we're miles away from the Turing test, I think personally. From the people I've been talking to, machine learning professors and stuff, they actually think of the sort of hype that has been put out there within these sort of circles of so-called self-professed experts within this arena. to be honest, and I'm sure some of them have some valid points and some valid information, but compared to sort of some of the industrial Internet of Things people like Dan Yarmaluk, who I interviewed a while back, who actually work on the ground with this technology. I mean, I was talking to my dad about it, and he raised a really interesting point, because he studied like industrial engineering at MIT, right? And he raised this point of like, actually, innovation, when you are using a production line. So, for example, if you're in a factory, you need to start at the end of the production line with the innovation. You don't start at the beginning, which I thought was an amazing actually insight into how it, because imagine you create this amazing innovation at the beginning of the production line, and then what happens at the end? It's going to create a nightmare, right?
Yeah, what you've got to do with all these innovations, technical or process or marketing or business development, is think about what the end consumer wants from this process, or from this phenomenon that you're creating, and which is the same as you're referring to with your dad, the end of the line, not the beginning. I'm throughout my career, I've been working with people who've put some amazing things together, innovatively speaking, typically technology-wise, in the context of what I'm saying now, that have never ever really had success in the market, however clever they are and however innovative they are. They didn't think about, well, what does the customer want? And I think there's an important point there, actually, which I believe all of my throughout my career. People used to say when we were implementing computers in the 70s, well, let's emulate the current process, and that's not a bad way to start thinking about it. But the fact is, you can do things much more innovatively with computing than you ever could in a manual process sense. So when you're designing processes of that kind and innovating business processes, you need to be aware of what's possible, which computing, the business computing phenomenon made possible. But because people didn't know what was possible, they were coming up with old-fashioned processes without understanding what was now possible because of the different way of doing things. So it's really important to think, well, here's now what is possible, and finding someone in your business who gets that is really important. And then figuring out how what is possible can meld with what is currently being delivered. And so this process enhancement, this process innovation, comes from 2 points of view, really. And I've just tried to describe them. What are we doing now, and how is it working, and can it work better? But what is possible here? Because you can't start off by saying, well, we're going to do it this way and do it that way, and effectively deliver business processes in the modern age unless you know what's possible, because it wasn't possible before. So it's a really important thing now. You've got to get a team together when you're doing innovation who understands what happens now, and people of a process orientation. And then you got to get the imaginary people out who can think, well, if this was possible, then wouldn't that be great? Now somebody in the middle has got to say, well, that is possible, or it's not possible, or that's not possible yet. So that's why this team thing that I was going on about earlier, that's why it applies so much in my mind, because you've got to get the talents together to figure out what the potential improvements to processes and the innovations you can make with your business are.
Well, that leads beautifully into our next part of this conversation, which is design thinking. And so according to the MIT quote that I found the other day, design thinking is a powerful process of problem solving that begins with understanding unmet customer needs, which is what you've sort of talked about. And from that insight emerges a process for innovation that encompasses concept development, applied creativity, prototyping, and experimentation, which is, we've sort of talked around that already. And when design thinking approaches are applied to business, the success rate, interestingly enough, for innovation improves substantially. So, yeah, I think it's really just the way to go, isn't it? It's ask the customer what they want, and that customer could be a department in your business. It doesn't necessarily have to be external to the business, does it?
No, it doesn't. I mean, there's a long-held concept within, in particular, American corporations and therefore the Western world, that your customer, the customer is the department that you're delivering your product or your service to. They don't have to be a customer. Customer thinking, in that sense, can have many links inside the business, as well as having the ultimate customer, which is that person outside, or that entity outside the business. So basically, the comment I'd make upon what you just said, following your description of what design thinking is, the customer doesn't always know what he wants. Well, the customer might know what he wants, but the customer doesn't know what's possible for him to want. So it's important that somebody on that side of the equation is either helping the customer to say the right things to you as a supplier, or that you have some kind of entity which is advising the customer on what's possible. I'm talking really computing now, which is where I spent most of my career. Most customers don't know what's possible. Therefore, how can they accurately describe what they want?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I was sort of talking with Dan, who you know of, and he was kind of saying, well, go out and see what's out there already, and if it's out there already, go and have a look at some of the software platforms where you can kind of find these things, and have a little think about it, and actually. So for one example, I mean, if you look at how you can actually use translate apps, for example, you can plug in, like Google has a translate open source application. You've got Microsoft that's got one of those. So it is possible to, all right, it's not 100% accurate, but it's very, very accurate compared to what it was. 200 languages are available now, which you can plug in whatever you're doing into that potentially, right? So that's just one example of something that you can actually use, right? And I'm sure you know loads of other examples.
Well, in today's cloud world, it's really interesting to think that almost any process can be delivered on demand into the system that you're creating. So innovation in a system sense is very easy to prototype these days. Once you've got somebody who understands how to architect a system and how to pull the services that are required from the interweb using the cloud approach, it's really easy to design a system at the first level for certain, and then the innovation, design thinking comes of saying, well, all these things exist in the world. We don't have to develop them. All we got to do is bring them to the process flow, the system, bring them there, prove the concept in terms of will this deliver what we want, and then deal with the issues of, well, it's not quite fast enough, or it's a bit too clunky, or it's a bit expensive, or the code over there doesn't really work well with the code over here. But fundamentally, I'd find it hard to define a service that you would require within a business process that wasn't available using cloud delivered technology.
Yeah, it is mind blowing when you think about it. I mean, I'm teaching my dad how to use his iPhone, right? He's 86 this summer, yeah, and he used to write programs like 50 years ago. I mean, he can't remember now, but it blows his mind, like just talking to Siri, just as an example, and getting Siri to do certain things, like send an email kind of a thing, or, send a text message, and the kind of text, the voice to text capabilities now are taken for granted, I think, in many instances with regular users. But when you sort of see someone that's kind of not seen this before, and how amazing it is, you realize that we're in this bright, shiny kind of object world where, everyone in technology is obsessed with the next technology, the latest thing. But actually, when you break it down and you look at it all, it's like, well, let's look at where we are now with an iPhone 8 or whatever the latest one is, compared to like an iPhone 4 or an old Nokia, right? And then you just look at it, and it's like, well, how many prototypes and how many millions of people and millions and billions of questions have actually gone into like refining Siri, for example?
Well, voice recognition is not new. The versions of voice recognition that appear on our phones these days, like Siri and Alexa and those other things, I forgot what Microsoft is called. But anyway, there are a number of voice recognition systems which are hooked up to doing real things. And speaking, you and I were talking about chatbots a few months ago. A chatbot is a very simple thing in a way, because once you've got voice recognition to a level where it's efficient enough, what you've just done is simply added a voice recognition layer to the user interface of an application, and it's not something that I find hard to grasp. One of the things I find hard to grasp at the moment, to be honest with you, is when I talk to Siri, it keeps getting it probably doesn't understand the northern accent very well, and and it often screws up what I'm saying to it. But fundamentally, if I've got a very dear friend who speaks to it almost mechanically and gets a top result every time. So speech recognition, converting that to text and converting it to system commands is all the rage now, and all those things. It's a bit like I was saying just a few minutes ago about all these things have been available. I think the glory of what's happening right now is they are being integrated innovatively and put into applications like Siri and Alexa and so on and so forth. Is it Cortana, the Microsoft one?
Yes, it is.
That actually are doing the things that you would have normally done with your fingers on a keyboard up to a couple of years ago. So this whole phenomenon is taking stuff that's kind of been in development for years and decades and bringing it to a point where it's integrated in such a way that the application of that combined technology, of those combined technologies, is just changing the way we work. The chatbot thing that you and I were talking about a couple of months ago kind of minimizes the reality of what's happened here. It kind of trivializes it, is a better word.
The word bot, you mean?
Well, the word chat and the word bot. The fact is, this is the user interface for really serious systems that is driven by voice.
Right.
People say, oh, there's a chatbot. My bank's got a chatbot. And when I talk to it, it doesn't make any sense. In fact, that happened just the other day. In fact, yesterday, in one of those conversations that you and I were looking at in that group. And, people have trivialized it.
Yeah.
The word, as an example, the term 3D print trivializes the fact that this is fabrication. 3D print is layered fabrication.
To explain what layered fabrication is, because I don't quite get that. I mean, I probably do, but
the reason it became kind of called printing is that something like an inkjet printer lays down a layer of a material, and then it lays down another layer on the top of it, and another layer on the top of it, and another layer on top of it, until what's been built is not print on a page. It's actually a physical object.
Got you.
So now, the idea of saying, well, that's 3D printing, in my opinion, has done the whole process no good at all, because people can't get their head round, how can you print things? Well, if you say, well, if I put one layer of material on the table, and another layer on top of that, and another layer on top of that, and another layer on top of that, everyone will then understand what we're doing here. We're building things in layers. We're not. But the point I was making about a chatbot, and the point I'm making about 3D print, it trivializes what the process is.
Trivial, yeah. Well, also, voice recognition can be used in so many different ways. It doesn't necessarily have to be a chatbot. It can actually be used in security for calling your bank, for example.
Well, basically, what we're saying here are some system components which, in my opinion, have been laughingly called chatbots, which are capable of driving your systems. Instead of you having to type it in, it's taking your words and relaying them to a machine which has got the pre-programmed intelligence to come back to you and say yes or no, or what do you mean by that, or in that case you should do this. So a chatbot is a lump of computer code which is pre-programmed by a human, not by some mythical thing in the stratosphere, by a human, to interact with you on the basis of what you say, and it recognizes what you say because of voice recognition. These things are not mystical, but to call them chatbots makes them sound like they are some kind of really small thing. They're not. If you could drive you can drive a very significant system by talking to it, and that's what they've hung the name chatbot upon, and it's trivialized it. And what I was saying earlier about 3D print, the same thing has happened in 3D print. The people don't understand how 3D print can be, because how can you print a bottle? Well, you can print a bottle. If you lay down a layer of liquid glass using inkjet technology and keep doing that and keep doing it until you've got enough layers, it'll become a bottle or a vase or whatever it needs to be. But the very term 3D print has trivialized it. That's why 3D fabrication is a much better way of describing what the process is, and giving it the gravitas that it needs. So, and I'm a big critic of the industry, my computer industry at large, for coming up with buzzwords that kind of cloud, and there's one in itself, that cloud the reality of what's being done here. These are very serious pieces of work, and they're being called trivial things.
Yeah.
So it's one of my big hobby horses. Anyway.
So with problem solving, right? We're understanding what the problem is for whichever department we're trying to fix. It could be an outside customer, or it could be an internal department. Then we're going to create a concept. Then we're going to find out if it's going to work. We're going to apply that creativity, prototype the product, and then we're going to experiment with it to make it work as best as it can. And then we're going to scale it and use it with more users. Is that a fair process?
Well, I'm sure if I wrote all that down and put it into a flow chart and and put the critical points in it and the milestones, there'll be some work left to do. But broadly speaking, yeah, that's it. And going again back to my, I don't want to sound like a stuck record, but going back to my original point of do it in a small sense and then roll it out, or do it in a narrow sense and prove it works and then roll it out to the rest of the business, is a much better way than hoping the process that you've designed does work and then giving it to the whole business all at once.
Yeah, but also actually having the money to invest, because I mean, when I was talking to Dan about like some of these CEOs keep approaching him and saying, we need some AI. And he's just like, well, what do you mean, guys? Like, and they're like, but we need AI. And he's like, well, actually, if you're going to invest in AI for something within your business, you're going to need to increase your staffing within that department by 2 times the kind of number of people you've got already for 2 years, is basically what he's recommending. And then you're going to get the benefits, because people are just under the impression that there's a magic wand that technology can just kind of fix, and in many cases it's not that, right? Is it really?
No, it's not. I mean, to repeat myself again, this is computer code. Now, people sell pre-written computer code, and the more of it they sell, the less the price gets, or the bigger they are, the more they can invest in producing these products that are so-called AI. But the reality is that whatever tools you use to do these jobs, and whatever tools you bring alongside to help you do the jobs, process is the key issue here. And if you can't stop a process and start a process just in the hope that it'll work, you've got to find a way of building the process over time, testing, integrating, partitioning, and so on, in order to make sure that you don't simply say, well, we've got AI now, so we don't need those jobs anymore. I think there's a period of time in the big fear about AI is going to take all our jobs. Dan's quite right. There's a time when actually we're going to employ more people in the short to medium term, because there are 2 sets of people at work here. There are the people who are implementing the AI, and there are the people who are there already. So it's not a simple AI takes all our jobs. I think there's a period of time where AI increases jobs, and then you start refining, and going back in time to the 70s when people were saying this to me, this computer will take my job away. Most people who successfully adopted and implemented and drove forward with computers grew their businesses and grew their jobs. Didn't find themselves in a situation where they didn't need people anymore, did they?
Exactly.
And it's the same thing, really. We're 40 years on now, but it's the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone in technology and like they like to think that what they're doing is like so far ahead, but it's like without those principles and like the business knowledge that people build up as well, like nothing has actually changed that much. It's still a process and it still needs work, right? And I think also the companies that are not innovating are seriously in trouble. I mean, they're going to be, I don't like the word disrupted, but if you think about what happened with Blockbuster, and in fact what happened actually, that I heard the other day that the CEO of Blockbuster launched a Netflix rival project within the company, and he didn't get the support from the rest of the company, and that's the reason that Netflix took over. Basically, they weren't fast enough to innovate.
Yeah, and company size has got a lot to do with that as well. It's often said that I was using this comparison just yesterday with someone. It's often said that small companies are better innovators than large companies, and by the way, small teams are better innovators than large teams, without any question, particularly in the software development arena. There's an equation there. I can't remember the dimensions of it, but if you had 6 people in a software development team, and you said we need to go faster, and gave them 12 instead, the project would slow down, because it's not really all about raw manpower or raw brain power. It's about the ability to interact in a flexible and meaningful and rapid way. But the thing I was talking about yesterday was TomTom. I was navigating from A to B, and I was using Google Maps. When you think about it, let's say 5 years ago, that was TomTom's domain. No one buys. I don't know whether what I'm about to say is true, but I wouldn't think about buying a TomTom now. TomTom were the market leader 5 years ago. Google came in with such a mass of resource and expertise and preordained assets that everyone, to my knowledge, now uses Google Maps to navigate, and TomTom has dwindled away. So you can be the market leader today, and it's not only innovation here; it's the ability to call on massive resource.
Right.
If you don't innovate, you're not in good shape. If you can't call on the resource of the competitor if you can't call on the same kind of resource that your major competitor does, then equally you're going to suffer. So innovation's got the rapid movement of a small team, a small focused team within its spectrum. It's also got the massive resource of a company like Google in its spectrum, because they can outpace people like that. Can outpace anyone. You couldn't hope to get the kind of assets behind you if you're the leader of TomTom that you can if you're the leader of Google. So it's not only about small and focused and rapid and flexible. It's also about available massive asset.
Yeah. I was actually saying to someone the other day that I don't know any other company that is as old as IBM within the technology space. And I think that the reason is because they just buy so many companies,
Well, I mean, IBM is legendary for innovating. And somewhere in the heart of IBM, there must be an equation somewhere that says, well, we don't need these products anymore, but we still own the innovation rights. I mean, the PC was called the IBM PC, but the company that grew off the back of the IBM PC was Microsoft. The innovation in the very first place was IBM's. It wasn't Microsoft. The notion of cloud has been IBM since forever. And again, IBM are in the artificial intelligence space. They are really active in there, as you well know.
Yeah.
Really, not the only player, but they are a very influential player in that artificial intelligence space. So that, innovation in a technical sense isn't always met by product delivery. With IBM, they stopped selling hardware at the PC level a number of years ago, sold the business, but they still are the thought leading champions of having made that market movement. So I admire IBM and their approaches really, very much, and the way that they approach technology and what's the word I'm looking for here? The intellectual thought that goes into IBM's initiatives is very commendable.
Yeah, they're a very ethical company, actually. So, I mean, some innovations can be too early, though, right? Like, if you sort of look at the market and you say, well, okay, so Google Glass came along, and then you've got like Microsoft HoloLens, and you've got all these sorts of things, and actually those innovations, whilst they're amazing, and like I want to get on board with that, and when it becomes more widely available and easier to use, I will probably end up embracing some glasses to replace, in essence, my handset for my telephone, right? But if people aren't ready, then that innovation just dies. Like with Google Glass, they just shelved it, didn't they?
No, it isn't dead.
No.
Google Glass will come back at some later point in the evolution of system interfaces. The idea that you can wear a pair of glasses and it can be showing stuff within the lens to you, it's basically a head-up display, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's an interactive head-up display, and that concept is not gone. But they brought it, and they tested it, and they very quickly then said, okay, well, you use the words, this is not quite the right time for it. We know it works now, but this isn't quite the right time. So shelve it, not throw it away, shelve it.
Yeah. Wait for the right time. Well, thanks, Mike. That's been really, really useful.
That's good. It's always good to talk to you, Nat. And I hope that some good comes from this conversation.
Thanks so much for listening. Please subscribe, and wherever you prefer, share with your friends. And if you enjoyed the show, drop us a review on iTunes or wherever you listen.